Okay, so how would you, introduce yourself to the audience? Like, what do you do? What is your company all about? How would you just brief someone with that?
Hi, so my name is Prinkit Patel, and I'm founder of Prinkit.in, a digital marketing company in Gujarat. And I'm also founder of Change Vadodara Campaign, which is a philanthropic NGO. So, this is what I do.
Okay, and like, what is the entire story behind you getting the label of fastest growing digital marketing company in Gujarat?
So the thing is, the secret lies in how and why did this company start. The thing
Okay,
is, I am not a digital marketer by education. When I started the first NGO, that is Change Vadodara campaign, we gathered over 1,700 volunteers, active volunteers, in just a period of year and a half. And that all happened because of the power of social media. We knew how to use it. And then I started my second business, that was Blue Hat Badges. So
okay,
that again grew with the help of social media only. We have around 8,000 followers, and we started receiving major orders from there.
okay.
So then, after seeing everything, I realized that the dots are connecting, and my expertise is not in making badges or anything, but in digital marketing, because that is where, with that only, all my businesses were growing. So then
Okay.
I started, and then I started looking for agencies who can help me grow, who can take up my business and then scale it up. But I did not find any single agency who actually does that.
Hmm.
Most were doing like making 15 posts a month, boosting some posts. So that is not digital marketing. That is the very basic of it.
Hmm.
So the actual digital marketing is sales oriented. It has to be strategy driven. And
Hmm.
I could not find any agency who could do that. So I
Hmm.
ended up doing myself for my
Hmm.
businesses. And because they grew, I realized my major expertise is in helping businesses to grow digitally.
Okay.
And with that in center, we built this entire company.
Hmm.
And because I was once a client and I knew what I needed from an agency, I and my team, we all are working to develop every single thing. And that is why we are growing like this.
Yeah. About this entire digital marketing thing, I wanted to ask. So, recently I've been working in the influencer marketing space, wherein I
Okay.
talk to brands and I pitch them that, okay, this is our digital property and I'd want you to advertise on that. And we exchange the stats and things like that. A very technical thing that comes over here is that, for example, say we are advertising for a pizza chain and they sell pizzas. Uh, one
Hmm.
question which always sticks to them is that, let's say the weekend is coming and these guys are like, we are running 3 story ads on your platform, and we
Okay.
like to have return on the same. That's a very nice
Okay.
idea. But this is a case specifically in India, and especially in not the metro cities like Baroda, Ahmedabad, Rajkot. That the people, as far as I've noticed, it's not that okay, today you post an ad and tomorrow they'll go to your shop and start buying things. Generally, the buying behavior, as far as I've noticed in Baroda, is that once you run ad, that thing gets stuck back of the mind in the heads of people, and then like 1 month from now, 2 months from now, when they will be in a mood to party, or when they will have to go out for a dinner, that time that ad will strike them back and they'll say that, okay, I had seen that ad of so and so cheesa spot in Baroda, let's go over there and let's eat over there. And when things like that happen, I wanted to ask that, how do you track matrix? Because the pizza owner would obviously be asking you that, hey, we ran an ad on your platform and we have received, let's say, only 4 orders from that. So how do you actually judge the how do you actually judge the success or failure of an advertisement from that basis?
Yeah, understood. So see, the buying behavior and the buying life cycle is very complex. And so let us say we are not running ads solely on Facebook, we are running ads on Instagram, Google, and other platforms. So now, as you said, the question is that how will the customer actually know that who visited from our ads?
Hmm.
So the thing is, when you open Facebook, when you see any advertisement,
Yeah.
you click on it, and then you get redirected to website. That is what Prinky.in does.
Okay.
The moment you get redirected to website, we get your IP address. And so basically we have your IP address. So now we can start remarketing you everywhere,
Hmm.
right? So now you visited our website once. you saw and responded to a website or advertisement only for once, but now you are in our loop. You will see our advertisements on daily basis.
Yeah.
Now whenever, so basically you have seen advertisement but you have not visited yet, but we will be in back of your mind throughout the time.
Yeah.
One fine day you feel ke your friend calls you ke bhai kahin pe chal khane jate hain, and then he'll tell you हाँ यार ये कुछ नया खुला है, let us go there. The moment you go there, we will ask for a number, or the when you are giving an order, they will ask for a number, and that number can be traced with that Facebook account, and then we can exactly find out कि हाँ इसको हमारी इतनी advertisement दिखी है, and after 1 month of him responding, he has visited our store. So this is very accountable with latest updates, and you can exactly trigger who visited, exactly measure who visited with how much ad spend and everything. So that is easily measurable.
Oh, and how do okay, so this was for the Facebook advertising thing, or all these platforms that we see, these dashboards, marketing boards and all. But
Yeah.
how do you like, so right now with the rise of Instagram Reels, there are people around us who have converted themselves into influencers. So suppose there was a person who as such used to post music videos. Right now, because of the reach on Instagram, their accounts have like shot up to 50,000, 60,000, and they are taking up ads from these local stores and all. Now,
Yeah.
if there is an influencer who is, let's say, at 60,000 or at 70,000, and there is a local store who is buying an Instagram story on the handle of this person, that Instagram story
Okay.
goes live for 24 hours. And then probably that person might go and shop anytime, like 1 month late or 6 months
Understood.
later. Then how does this influencer prove his worth to the client that, hey, this has come via my account? How does that happen?
So let us see this from two sides.
Okay.
One is influencer wants to prove that मेरे से आपको इतना profit हुआ, and the businessman wants to know where should I invest more on which influencers, right?
Yeah,
so to answer this question, both will have to make some changes and make some change in their approach. Let us say if a businessman is giving, like we also did some influencer campaigns. So what we do is we tell let us say, I'll give you one example. It was for a beauty salon. So we told influencers to give away some passes on their Instagram, on their stories, and those passes will have their promo codes. And whoever visits the store with that promo code only gets that discount and benefit. And that is how the businessman or the entrepreneur or the business side can track, okay, ye influencer mein se actual footfall itna hua, so that they can spend more over there. So they'll have to create a channel, a system for accountability. And if we see things from influencer side, genuine influencers, if they want to distinguish themselves from people who just have fake likes and unorganic reach, so they can, of course, show some metrics to the entrepreneur. Let us say I am an influencer and someone is giving me कि ये आप post करो, तो वो post के बाद after a week or so I can show them the metrics कि इतना reach हुआ, that is fine, but reach में से इतने लोगों ने share किया. Share is a little more valuable metrics कि वो लोग ने किसी friend को share किया कि यार कहीं पे यहाँ कहीं पे जाते, इतने लोग ने save किया. So such metrics, and influencer can take initiative and show it to the entrepreneur, or the entrepreneur can ask for it, and this is how you can make things accountable. So you'll have to make some changes in the way you do the campaign.
Yeah, makes sense on this. Moving apart from the technical side of things, I wanted to go into this entire startup ecosystem. And right now, all startups are doing this, that they are trying to create this family sort of vibe, that there's this entire wholesomeness in the work culture and the environment of the startup. Even you guys are doing a lot on that, because your Instagram life at Prinket, that story highlight shows all the activities that you're doing. But there are people who have said that there is a certain downside of doing that. So I was listening to this guy who actually said that this entire culture of, hey, you are not our employees, you are our family members, is actually wrong, and it goes somewhere toxic in the long term. Because the thing is that when you're running business, you need to like reprimand people, you need to make them fall accountable, you need to do some hard things. And the thing is that when you say someone once that, okay, you're my bro, there's this family vibe between us, the next time when you reprimand that person, he will take it more negatively on himself. He'll say that, okay, this fellow earlier he had told me that it's all cool between us, and right now he's acting like my boss. So there is certainly some sort of toxicness in this. So do you think that this entire vibe of family culture in startups, it might lead to something negative in the long term?
Man, this question is amazing, and see, people are taking it completely wrong. The thing is, a family vibe, a vibe of ownness, that is a byproduct.
Okay.
That is not the end goal. See,
Okay.
a lot of organizations, a lot of startups that I meet, they feel कि यार मेरे को तो मेरी company family जैसी बनानी है, and that is why they take such initiatives, celebrations, and that. But that is byproduct. That is a function of something. And what is that? That is a well organized task management system,
Okay.
right? कि आपकी what आपकी company में सारे task well organized है.
Hmm.
Everything has a due date. No one is overloaded, right? The leadership is nice, the leadership is proactive. So when such things are there, when there is actual vision in the organization, when all these things combine, then a life like family is a byproduct of it. When so, and if you are getting this feeling of ownness between team members, if you are seeing this camaraderie between all the team members, then that is something, that is a form of achievement.
Okay.
But
So
if you take
yeah,
it wrong,
you're saying that like as a founder, you don't need to chase के मेरे को family vibe लाना. You have to chase the fluency of
no.
tasks. You have to chase the fluency of tasks,
Exactly.
and that would
Exactly.
lead to a family culture
Yeah.
automatically being created.
Exactly. Imagine what is the difference between employer, employee, and brother and sister, or father and son. So the thing is, see, employer is always like कि मेरा काम नहीं किया, मेरा काम नहीं किया. So that he or she gets angry. The employee feels victimized, and all these things reduce the feeling of ownness, right?
Yeah.
When in family, everyone knows. बच्चे को पता है कि यार मेरे को लाइट का बिल भरने का है, पापा को पता है कि वो भरेगा. And then there basically everyone understands कि मेरा क्या काम है, मेरे को क्या करना है, क्या नहीं करना है. और जब everyone is clear about their roles, everyone, there is a proper task management system in organization कि कोई कुछ काम भूल ही नहीं सकता. At that time, the feeling of family comes as byproduct.
Yeah.
People who keep this as the main product, they fail. They mess up, and they end up losing a lot of things, the way you said.
Understood. So this point is clear that putting the family culture should not be the priority. Creating a proper task pipeline is the main goal. So that is something which got clear. But in this, I wanted to ask that once you create a very nice task funnel, and so things are working perfectly well, and after that, let's say there's just some particular employee who goes off track and he's not working well. Does it become more hard to fire this person just for the reason that probably at some point of time he had that family vibe, but right now he is a certain out of track? So does it become, is that a certain level of caution or a certain level of nervousness when it comes the time to fire this person?
See, this answer depends on personal leadership. It depends from leader to leader. If leader is emotionally gets very connected, then that is a challenge, right? But the thing is, see, let us see it another way. If everything goes good, the employee will himself feel the importance of organization. Okay, yaar, this is my organization. I gained so much thing. I gain a lot of knowledge from here. तो वो पहले से खुद से ही responsible होगा. If he is not responsible, then because the leader and employee is emotionally connected, leader would want to give him more chances, right? So that is again a good thing of a leader, right? The employee is getting few more chances to prove himself. I want to give you some examples of our organization only. We have had cases when we are not satisfied with someone's work.
Okay.
And it came to a situation wherein we felt कि नहीं यार, we should fire this guy. But because of our emotional connect, we could not stop ourselves from giving more chances, and the one who gained chances proved himself, and now he is one of the best team members, one of our best team members. So that is again the benefit of a family feeling. But when the water goes above nose, there is definitely a way you should fire him, and I don't think anyone would find any resistance in firing someone after giving some chances.
Yeah, makes sense. And as far as I've heard this, and the cons apart, what I mentioned, that there can be a chance of future negativity. The biggest pro or the biggest plus point of having a family culture in your startups is that it protects your startups from a lot of employee poaching activities, which is done on a huge scale in startups, especially that because in startups generally it's like, okay, how much is he paying you? take 2,000 more, join my organization.
Yeah.
And that's when at certain times there are employees who just stay back for the sake that okay, this guy is paying me 2,000 more, but the vibe in this company is better, so I might as well leave that 2,000 for my peace of mind over here.
Yeah. I think there is a saying that teach your employees so well that your company would want to hire them, would offer them twice the salary you are offering, and treat them so well that they will say no to them. So basically, it is, yeah, of course, as you said, it reduces that chances of poaching.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, right now I wanted to move on towards the entire student circle. So, a lot of students watching this might look at digital marketing as a probable thing that because we have heard a lot of people, especially YouTubers, saying out things like that, oh, this generation has a very it's very easy for them to succeed in digital marketing, because this is the generation that has grown up scrolling through Instagram, that has grown up watching through Facebook. So only if a person is like, if a college kid is spending like 3-4 hours on Instagram, he knows what kind of ads pisses him, and he knows what kind of ads actually catches his attention. And that is a very good trait if he enters into an agency model, or if he enters into a job which is into the digital marketing field. Now, having said that, this is what I've heard, that digital marketing jobs, kind of a lot of people do not take them because they are not well paying. And this is completely my survey done, that a lot of college students, when they enter into the first year of their college, they take up all these cool internships that okay, I'm interning at so and so agency, I'm interning with them, I'm doing a job with them, and they are paying me a stipend 5,000, 10,000, all good. But when it comes to take a thorough career decision, like when their college final year gets done, that time they leave all those jobs, all those internships, take up the CAT examination, do their MBA, and then get placed in some big firm like McKinsey, Times of India, and such. So why is there such gap? Like why is this scenario happening in the market?
See, the thing is, when we talk about digital marketing, there is big inflation going on in market. I'll tell you why. Every entrepreneur these days wants to go digital, so that is where they look for an agency. So the need of agencies is constantly growing.
Okay.
Now, in order to start an agency, you know what? Even if you want to start an agency, you only need two things. One is a logo, and another is a laptop. And you can claim to be one of the best agents of the country. So this is how agencies are growing, right?
There was this meme once that at one point of time, if you wanted to start a company in India, you needed 1 lakh of paid up capital and stuff like that. Today, you only need an Instagram page, and then you need to write in your bio CEO @ so and so.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So that is what is happening these days. Let us say there is severe demand in market. Anyone who uses Facebook and learns a few things, or does a small 5-10 day course on Google or on Facebook, feels that I can start my own agency. The moment he feels that, he will make a logo, he will start doing that, and he will also grow. He will also grow. Why? Because there is big, need in market, and this is one of the very rare products wherein the buyer does not know what exactly this is. Like I tell you, I have, let us say, X clients. Most of them don't know what exactly they should expect from me. Right, because they do not know what is digital marketing.
It's just this wave that everyone is talking about digital. So there are clients who just come to your office and say, "Arey bhaiya, hamara bhi kuch digital shuru karo. Hame bhi digital karwa do."
Exactly. And now those small people, those people who start with limited knowledge, they also get a lot of clients, because the client does not know what to expect. So client would hire them for 2-3 months, 4 months, and then he will leave. नहीं यार मेरा profit नहीं हो रहा है, I want to stop. Either he will lose trust from social media itself, digital itself, or he'll lose trust from that agency. But at the end, he will lose, right? So this is what is happening these days. If we talk about 100 agencies, 85 to 90 agencies are a result of increased need in market, and they are not ideal solution. So what happens is, a student easily gets a job somewhere or an internship somewhere, because there are a lot of companies like this, but they cannot retain their client because they do not know what actual digital marketing is, and that is why they are not able to pay their employees what they deserve, or pay their employees so that they can live a luxury life. Now, what actual digital marketing is? See, digital marketing is just a tool. right? The actual knowledge any agency should have is the buying psychology. कि buyer कैसे खरीदता है, क्या खरीदता है. That was there जब खाली newspaper ads थी. That was there when hoardings थे, and that is there when digital marketing is there. किसी को Facebook में post boost करना आ जाए, that does not mean he can open a digital marketing agency. So the actual agencies, the actual marketers, if a student goes and applies there, then he will definitely, his career will be secure. He'll definitely live a very healthy life. He'll live a very balanced life. So a student has to differentiate between the real agencies and agencies who have been formed out of inflation of the need.
Understood. But in this, I'd like to continue this segment asking that I have been very active in this entire digital marketing agency ecosystem. Like I know people sitting in some of the top agencies.
Okay.
And these are the agencies who run campaigns for Netflix and stuff. So they are well established, well sorted agencies. And
Okay.
we have like talked off camera. I've like talked off camera to these people, and they have told me that the scene in these agency model is that you when you enter in as like, let's say, what are the most common job titles? It's a graphic designer, it's a content writer, video editor, SEO writer, website handler, all these things. You start off with, say, a package of, if in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, you start off with a package of 30-35K. That's your starting. And then you will take at least the age of 30-31. Your age will be 30-31 when you reach a package of 1 lakh in these agencies. Versus when if a person is doing all this CAT and all, like if he's able to enter into the top colleges and crack the biggest interviews, he starts off with, say, an 80,000 or a 90,000 package, and that's when that deal becomes more lucrative for the generation of instant gratification. That they want that, okay, I need the money right now. I can't start off with 30K and then wait for my package to go up to 1 lakh. So with this entire digital ecosystem growing, do you think that like how far are we from a time that there will be agencies who would be hiring say a video editor, a graphic designer, a content writer with the starting package of, hey, that I'm hiring you at 80,000 a month, at 90,000 a month, at a lakh a month? Is that coming anytime soon, or that's a very far-fetched dream?
See, to be honest, that is already there, right? But that is already there in a lot of agencies. That is already there even in Vadodara.
Okay.
Right. So the only thing is, such seats are less, such requirements are less, and student has to make their way by developing himself or herself, getting experience, so that they can be of that level. See, when creative industry, this entire industry is considered as one of the highest paying industries in the entire world, right? Because see, creativity is the ultimate thing. Creator, because there are creators, there are managers. See, because if someone is creating, we need someone to manage, right? So creators are always placed above managers in any company, in any field you see, you can study it. So the position is already there, the salary packages are already high. The only thing is that the need is a little less these days, and I see that within a couple of years there will be significant rise in such vacancies and positions, wherein a student will be able to get, a student directly getting into there may not be possible, but a student who learns it, has some 2-3 years of experience, develops himself or herself in a way, gets all round knowledge. A designer, if he gets to know what is content writing, a designer if he gets to know what is copywriting, a designer if develops understanding of buyer psychology, then he can easily get such packages. But if designer feels कि मने तो सारू poster बनावता आवड़े बाकी तमे क्यों ये अंदर लखी नाखिस, so then he will never get it. So it is about all round development.
Yeah, this makes sense. So next, what I wanted to ask you was the entire hiring process wave. So in top MNCs, the wave is extremely like the funnel is extremely large, and there's this ongoing conversation that why do big MNCs only love hiring IIM pass outs or IIT pass outs, and there is a very strong reason behind that, because their hiring process is extremely complicated. So what these big agencies do is that even they know that there is no difference in terms of knowledge in an IIM pass out versus a non-IIM pass out. There's exactly no difference. How they work is that when they hire IIM pass outs as employees in their companies, they use that as an advertisement in front of their clients, that see, all our employees are IIM pass outs, and that's why we can demand a huge chunk of money for the projects that we get done. And that's how this entire ecosystem works. The thing is completely different in startups, because I've spoken to some of the big startup, especially in digital, the big startup founders in India, and they have said that some of their very crucial hires are people who have just randomly walked in. Like, they had not even expected that person to be a part of their team. It's just that somehow they happen to meet, and now they are playing one of the most crucial roles in their companies. So if you had to break down, like, for your own company, what is the hiring procedure? How do you look at hiring an employee, and what is the interview process, and how do you decide the final in or out for any candidate?
Okay, so say at Blinkit.in we have modified our recruitment process a lot in quite couple of hours, like couple of months,
Yes, yeah.
because so earlier the process was like that we wanted to hire people who are already very skilled and have a lot of experience, but as the way company is growing, we realize that such people are very less in market, and we won't be able to fulfill the need that we have. So now our current recruitment process focuses majorly 80% on the attitude of candidate. Yeah, so I'll tell you what exactly I mean by that. When someone comes to Blinkit.in or applies at Blinkit.in, our 80% selection criteria is what is his or her attitude towards job. Why is he or she working? Is he or she working just to get some livelihood, or is he in severe need of money, that is why he has applied, or he has some, he wants to grow in life. Another is his attitude towards his team members. Okay, let us say how he work, how does he coordinate with his team, how is his communication, how does he see his team members as, right? And the main thing is attitude towards learning. If he or she is very positive about learning new things, curious about learning new things, comes up with questions every time we teach them something, then anyone who meets these three criteria almost gets selected at our company. And then we have made a recruitment process. After recruitment process, if someone has very good attitude towards all these things, then the training process starts, wherein we take the complete responsibility of educating them about our skills, about the skills that we require. So at Blinkit.in, it is all about training. If we go technically, whenever a candidate enters or applies, first is a screening call, wherein our HR talks with him or her and gets to know about his profile. So that is first filter. Those who get filtered have to visit our office and give a psychometric and aptitude test. So they have to write this test, which is around 45 minutes, wherein we get to know their personality, we get to know their basic knowledge of maths and everything, which is quite needed. After that test is done, they have to do a practical task. So if he's a graphic designer, he has to make a couple of creatives at our office itself. If he is a content creator, we give them some content to write. And after the practical test, we do a panel interview, wherein the department head, the founder, the directors, and the HR, they sit together and then they decide and filter the candidate. If he or she passes all these processes, then now the entire process, this three-step process, is to determine two things. One is how is his or her attitude, and second is skills and knowledge. If attitude is good, then we'll get to know okay, ये process के दौरान हमको पता चल जाएगा कि इतनी चीजें सिखानी पड़ेगी. So that becomes a part of our training. And if attitude is not as per desired, then that is a no.
Understood.
So the attitude is the center of the entire recruitment process.
Yeah, that makes sense. So in this, I wanted to ask that after when startups expand a bit, and when, like, not literally expand, but when they even go out to, let's say, 100 employees, that time there is this entire conversation, which is that there is a term known as the co-founders bubble, which generally says that whenever any startup is found, it's generally one or two people who are the co-founders, and then there are 3-4 people around them. So it's like a pack of 5 or at max 6 people who actually are there from day zero, and they are the one who actually built the thing from scratch. And then things scale, they hire further, and then employees grow 20, 30, it reaches 50, 100, and that happens. But the core remains the core. The 4 to 5 core people are still the core. And This is not to, you know, demean them, or this is not looking down upon them. It is just a natural human sentiment, that it's like a bro code, that, you know, you were there for me when no one was there, you were there for me when this company was not even a company. So I, like, it's a very human instinct that I have a certain soft corner for you. And that is something which certain employees complain about, that you know, we entered into that startup, but there is this closed net, there's this closed circuit of 4 to 5 people, who is the 2 co-founders and the 3 people initial hires, and they have a different vibe. Like, the jokes in between of these 5 people would be different from the jokes that are happening among other employees, that a normal employee would not be able to vibe that much with any of these 5 people, the way that these guys are vibing amongst themselves. And a lot of employees face this, that startups, if you are lucky that you are hired in the initial 5 people, that's good. Otherwise, it's just like a normal employee, you need to leave your life. So what is your take on, like, is this a real thing? Does that happen in the market? And if yes, then how do you deal with that? How do you come out of that?
Yeah. So see, to be honest, this does happen. This does happen in a lot of agencies, a lot of startups. There are. I want to share two perspectives. One is from the founder side. One is from the leader side. If something like this is happening, the leader is failing, right? Because it is leader's responsibility to ensure that nothing like this happens, right? See, if someone is, if let us say someone joins us in the initial days of an organization, of course they are more valuable because they have the ownness of organization. And when a startup starts, see, it is like Diwali ki safai, ghar ki safai. There is no job description for it. You have to do everything that you come across, right? So, and these initial people, you know, have done a lot of things which they were not expected, things which, you know, which were not expected from them. They have the ownness of organization. They
Not
take
even,
decisions that
even if we keep tasks apart, there might have been incidents wherein just that person stood by you when you were crying, probably. There are
exactly
incidents like that.
That is also an emotional journey, right? Emotional connect with them. So yeah, but if that hampers new people in the team, then then of course those new people will feel undervalued. They will feel, okay, better I go to a place wherein I am valued more. So in that case, the leader is, you know, not fulfilling his responsibility, and he should, you know, rethink about this. Yeah, is something like this happening in my organization? If yes, how do I plan to improve it? In our company, we have done something very interesting to solve this. Whoever new joins us, first step is we learn from them. Instead of teaching them, first thing is we learn from them. Let us say someone joins us today. We already have a very good team who are very well connected. We have jokes that only we understand, right? And the new guy won't understand. But the first thing that we do is we learn ki bhai aap kya seekh ke aaye ho. So he or she will share a lot of things, and we actually learn. That, you know, bridges a little gap. The next thing that we do is we keep them in our core team at least for 1 month, and we involve them in all the leading decisions of organization. Though and they just come sit and observe, but they feel that I am a part of the central team, and after a month they find their own way. मतलब कि अगर एक महीने में the person is not a, you know, leader, he is not an entrepreneur, then he will, you know, get out of that thing and he'll find his own way. And if he is a part of, he wants to do something big, he wants this entrepreneurship, he wants to take responsibility, he'll fit into our group. So, you know, if someone new joins us, even interns, I personally take them to meet clients when I go. So they feel higher, they can build instant connect with them. So that is something like this a leader can try. If we see things from employee side or from team member side, if he goes to an organization wherein something like this is happening, so I think that is not a challenge. He should not feel कि यार इधर मेरे को ऐसा, मतलब ये लोग तो खुद के ही जीवन में जीते हैं, खुद का ही वाइफ बना के घूम रहे हैं, हमारा तो वैल्यू नहीं है. He should be, you know, very proactive. He should come up with ideas. And I read one book by Stephen Covey wherein he said that, you know, the solution to biggest problems is a presentation. So let us say if you are sitting in an organization and you feel कि यार ये तो अच्छा नहीं चल रहा है, so instead of, you know, making a small group and discussing कि हाँ यार ये लोग तो ऐसे वैसे, the new person should, you know, make a small presentation of a small problem that a company is facing, a 5-6 slide presentation. He can meet founder and present it कि भाई ऐसा ऐसा problem है हमारे company में कि deadline meet नहीं हो रही है. I think ये reason से meet नहीं हो रही है, and I want to help you in solving this by me doing this. I just need your yes so that I can do end to end everything. The moment he does that, he is taking a step ahead in the core team. Another presentation, another step. After the end of 2, 3 problem solving, he will be a part of core team, right? So it is a two-way thing.
Yeah, understood. I got that point. With this entire thing, you already have mentioned out your hiring process and things like that. Right now, the students in their college, they are in a certain dilemma, and the dilemma is that when you go on the internet, when you log into your YouTube, there are two separate conversations that are happening. There is one side of YouTube that says that, dude, India में hard skills saturate हो गए क्योंकि हर सेकंड इंसान इंजीनियरिंग कर रहा है. एवरीवन इज लर्निंग दोस कोडिंग, टेक स्किल्स, वीडियो प्रॉपर, very finesse video editing. Everyone knows that. So now what is more valuable is your communication skills. How do you interact? How do you speak? How do you talk to people? That is your more valuable thing, and you need to work on that. And then there is this another side of society which says that no, the code remains the code. Like, you might be very good at talking, your communication skills might get you the job, but within 2 months, if they are telling you to edit, let's say, 10 videos in a month, but your skill is not that grip, you don't have the grip on your work, you won't be able to do that. So how much ever good you are at speaking, you need to be good at doing. So these are like two apart conversations. So I know that the general answer to this is that a proper mix of these both skills, like a proper mix of these two skills. But if there's a college student who is having, let's say, 10 hours in his life, how much should be the ratio division? Like, how many hours should be given towards the hard skills versus the soft skill? Like a general 7:3, 8:2. What is the ratio there?
So if we talk about this in terms of time, see, the soft skill development is not a task. Okay. See, it is soft skill cannot be developed by, let us say, I'll do this thing. मैं हर रोज 1 घंटा में ये बुक पढ़ूंगा या तो हर घंटा मैं सॉफ्ट स्किल का ये वीडियो देखूंगा and I'll develop soft skills. That is a different case. See, developing a soft skill, developing, it has to do with a lot of things apart from, so like one is the experiences that you have. आप कितनी कॉलेज इवेंट्स में जाते हो, आप कितनी कॉलेज के बाहर की इवेंट्स में जाते हो, आप कॉलेज के एक्टिविटीज में कितना पार्टिसिपेट करते हो, फिर आपका फ्रेंड सर्कल कैसा है, व्हाट डू यू डिस्कस. So all these things add up to your soft skills. See, you cannot spend 1 hour a day per month and then you develop a skill. So soft skill is an ongoing process, and developing it need, if you have to divide it in terms of percentage, 50 to 60% time has to be given in developing soft skills. Okay. And remaining 30 to 40% or 40 to 50% can go behind developing this hard skill. If we talk about this in terms of organizational hierarchy, और मतलब ऊपर फाउंडर होगा, उसके नीचे को फाउंडर्स, डायरेक्टर्स, उसके नीचे ये वो, एकदम नीचे आएंगे एग्जीक्यूटिव्स. So now if we talk about this hierarchy, नीचे बहुत बड़ा होगा, ऊपर एकदम छोटा होगा. It will be like a pyramid, right? So नीचे you need people who have hard skills only. जैसे आप पिरामिड में थोड़ा ऊपर जाओगे, सॉफ्ट स्किल थोड़ी चाहिए, थोड़ी हार्ड स्किल कम होगी तो चलेगा. और थोड़ा ऊपर जाओ, एकदम ऊपर खाली सॉफ्ट स्किल्स ही चाहिए. अगर किसी फाउंडर को वीडियो एडिट करना नहीं आता, but he has a way to communicate, he has a power to lead, he'll be able to get those people in downline to do that thing. So another thing is, but now the thing is, without hard skill, you cannot even get into this pyramid, right? Getting into this pyramid, the only door is from down. So you need to have amazing hard skill, and only then you will be able to become a part of this pyramid. And with soft skill, you will be able to climb ladder and go above in hierarchy. Yeah. So if you want just to remain in the bottom line, hard skill is enough. And if you want to go above, you need to develop soft skill along with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So next what I wanted to cover was that the HR guys in big companies generally have this term. I don't even know if this is relevant with the times that we are living in. And that term is employee career pathway plan. So generally, if you pass out from a big B school and you go sit for the interview rounds of all these big companies, so now what happens is, now you have passed through a very elite B school of India. So now you are talented, that's done. So now the companies fight amongst themselves to retain you. That is also a conversation in the placement sessions that's happening. So now, okay, money is a thing. Everyone sheds out money. Everyone gives out things. All that given and done, the final perks what they try to give is that the HR people try to show the candidates your employee pathway, which is that, okay, today if you are joining this organization, 3 years down the line you'll be here. In the next 3 years you'll be here. After 2 years you'll be sitting. So they will exactly show you how, as per time, your chairs will change in that particular MNC or organization. Now, that thing cannot necessarily be done in startups, because most startups themselves have a journey of 3 years, 5 years. So it makes no rational sense even asking them कि सर मैं 10 साल बाद आपकी कंपनी में क्या हो, कहाँ होगा. High chances शायद कंपनी भी नहीं रहेगी 10 साल बाद. Things like that also happen. So in that case, how do startups assure this sense of security to their potential hires? That, hey, just trust us, and although we don't know what's going to happen in future, but we'll figure out things as we proceed.
See, joining a startup is like becoming a man on mission. See, when you join an MNC or an organization, your end goal is money. From where you get, जिधर से ज़्यादा पैसा मिला, you will jump there. Along with maintaining good CV कि हाँ यार 1 साल में छोड़ूंगा तो अच्छा नहीं लगेगा, तो मैं 1.5 साल बाद छोड़ूंगा. So that is MNC feeling, right? And when we talk about startup is like joining a mission. Startup is like joining a movement. See, lot of people joined Gandhiji, right? Gandhiji did not commit any hike, right? कि भाई मेरे साथ डांडी मार्च कर लो, आपको सबके 200 रुपए बढ़ जाएंगे. That was a mission, right? And startups, if you see any startup, they start with a strong vision. They start with a strong purpose. And this purpose is what builds the entire movement, right? So whenever someone joins a startup, they don't join it for money, but they join it for a bigger purpose. And see, for someone who wants to grow, startup is the best platform, because अगर आपको कोई MNC में जाओगे तो आपको 5 साल का करियर पाथवे बताएंगे, राइट? बट वो भी ऐसा तो नहीं बताएंगे कि आप डायरेक्टर बन जाओगे, आप कोर टीम के मेंबर बन जाओगे, टॉप 10 जन के में से मेंबर बन जाओगे, राइट? वो तो पॉसिबल ही नहीं है एमएनसी में. बट व्हेन यू टॉक अबाउट स्टार्टअप, इफ यू आर वेरी प्रोएक्टिव, इफ यू हैव द पावर टू solve problems and present them in the right way, you can even take leading position in just a couple of months, right? So startup is a open door कि जिधर जितनी औकात है उधर आके सेट हो जाओ, समझे? So that is why people join startup, and not everyone joins startup, but those who join startup with this feeling, they eventually grow even more than what this career pathway shows. In other companies.
This point is actually nice, because I've seen that happen, that in MNCs there is a certain cap to your promotions, like you can't get promoted beyond a certain level, whereas the scene is completely different in startups. Like you can enter the core team very easily in a span of months, I can say. But there are people who have a counterintuitive statement to this as well, wherein they say that when we are young, like when we essentially start working at the age of 22, 23, so all these things, designation, post, मेरी जो office में chair है उसके side पे क्या लिखा हुआ है below my name, all these things matter a lot. But they say that when you cross a certain age, say 27, 28, and family responsibilities start rolling in, उस time पे designation does not matter that much as takeaway salary matters. And that's when they say that okay, probably I may not be the vice president at, say, a startup. I may be the 100th employee at a big MNC. But even the 100th employee at a big MNC takes away more salary than, say, the VP of a new and emerging startup. Then there are like 100 possible scenarios that, okay, this one gets funded and then this one's paycheck goes up. But in a general scenario, this is what happens. That even the 100th or 200th employee at a big MNC takes away more salary at home than, say, a VP at a startup. Then how do you counter points like this? What is the lure that you give to employees that no, stay with us, be the VP over here rather than going to the MNC?
See, now that is again a questionable thing. Like, let us say if someone is VP in a startup and he can get a little more salary or something in an MNC. No matter the position is like 100th employee or something. The thing is, he will not get the feeling of ownness. He will not get the feeling of purpose. And this is a human psychology. This is a human mentality, any human will have it, that he or she wants to live with a purpose, right? And startup gives you that feeling of purpose, and that purpose is beyond any salary.
Yeah.
So, and there are two types of people, right? Those, there are one category who do not care for purpose. They only care कि भाई कितना मेरे को मिलता है, मेरा family set हो जाए, मैं चलता रहूं, that is fine. On the other hand, there are people who want to live with a purpose. Now again, if it also depends from startup to startup. Uh, if you are VP in a startup, so let us say if you want to become 100th employee in a X company and you want to become VP in a startup, what do you think can become earlier? What do you think you can become earlier if you have necessary potential? You can become vice president in a startup earlier than 100th employee in any company, right? Yeah. So if you will have to spend 10 years or 20 years to become 100th employee in any company, and you'll have to just spend just 2.5 years to become vice president in any company, and in a startup, so the time duration is very less. और जो 100th employee है उसके जितना तो startup शायद, if the startup is good, if the startup is going good, so they can also offer that much amount या तो उससे थोड़ा कम. But the time duration also matters.
This purpose point that you mentioned, is that a reason why we see incidents wherein people like IIT, IIM pass outs, big MNC, 5 years worked over there, quit MNC and join a startup? Is it exactly the purpose factor that plays over here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Purpose is the major factor.
Yeah. So next, moving on, I want to talk about this entire remote hiring wave that's happening. And because of Corona, it's obviously pushed wherein people are working remotely, things are happening. And right now, I think we have the systems in place to even make remote work function. So firstly, let's talk about just the base level of remote hiring, which is that a company, say in Bombay, Bangalore or Delhi, is hiring people from, let's say, a Baroda and Ahmedabad, or even if we go far back to, say, a Rajkot. People are hiring from these places and they don't even have to visit the local offices. In fact, the founder and this employee might not even meet face to face probably any time in their life. Everything's happening remotely. Do you think that things like this is actually happening? Because in Corona, many people shouted these things that remote will take over and remote work is the future, this and that, this and that. And when we visit their company websites, we need so and so position, should be willing to move to Mumbai after Corona. That's clearly written. So there is this two-sidedness which is obviously seen in their company profile. So what's your take on remote work? Is it good? Is it bad? And do you think it's scaling up with future?
See, to be honest, remote work is like outsourcing it to someone at a fixed monthly pay. So basically, why do companies want in-house solution and not outsource it to another company, right? Because outsourcing, it is like outsourcing it to individuals. Because when no matter you are an employee of that company, you are getting salary, you are on payroll, but the thing is you are not a part of their culture. You do not see your colleagues on daily basis, right? So the feeling of connect with the organization drastically reduces, right? You are sitting from home, you are working for this company, they are paying more. Another day you will shift to this company because they are paying you 2,000 rupee more. Why would you shift? Because there is no severe connect with the organization. You do not know who the founder is. You do not know who is your colleague, right? So with these reasons, this thing, remote work, will definitely increase a little, but won't increase beyond certain extent. Because after certain extent, companies need to have in-house teams, need to have people who they can build a community with whom they can build a team with, who can see each other on daily basis, share talks, come up with ideas and initiatives so that the company can go ahead. For small tasks like data entry, like recruitments, they can be given work from home. Like telecalling, they can be mobilized, but the core tasks, core functions and operations of organizations cannot be given for work from home.
I wanted to add a part to this. Like right now with the entire Corona thing also, where do you feel companies like let's say Zoom or Slack or all these companies, where are they failing? Like because all of us are noticing a trend that remote work 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, at some point it will boom, at some point it will flourish. Then right now, as a startup owner yourself, where do you see these companies failing? Like, what is it that they're missing to do, that they're not able to generate that human vibe, that human connect, what you're saying, what happens in real office?
So that's an interesting question. You see, uh, empathy is one thing.
Okay.
See, let us say if someone is working at, let us say there is a graphic designer at my organization, right? Now he is sitting in front of me. He did not, ask for a tea today, right? And now he asks for it on daily basis. So our office boy will ask him, Ashwin bhai will ask him, yaar Neeraj bhai kya maaje cha na mangai, શું થયું? So that is empathy. And because of such human gestures, human is considered as social animal. See, would you be able to just express, empathize for someone on a screen? If I am meeting you on a Zoom meeting, I will not be knowing that what you are wearing on your pants or shorts. Even I do not know that. In that case, how can I know your life, right? If someone is upset at work, I'll go and ask him, Neeraj bhai, kya hua? Sab life mein barabar chal raha hai na? So something like that cannot happen when it comes to online communication like Zoom and everything. And that is the key essence of building a community. An organization without community is considered as failure. If you see modern organizations, they all emphasize on building communities. So empathy cannot be expressed. And if Zoom finds a way wherein people can empathize for each other, then I think they can succeed.
Yeah, makes sense. That's where I think it needs, like, this is a very rough idea, but I think it needs some sort of a collaboration between Zoom and Reddit, because Reddit has a very strong community base. Like, people actually vibe for each other on Reddit. That I see you and things like that. So I think a mixture of these two can lead to probably a solution.
Definitely.
So next what I wanted to ask you was that with the entire lockdown thing, another trending joke on the internet was people taking up courses. That there was this guy from Tamil Nadu who actually his picture went viral, wherein he had a suitcase filled with Udemy certifications. So now, given that my personal experience, online courses work. They work. If you take the good one, they genuinely work. But with this entire wave of online coming, wherein any person, like, probably tomorrow there might be someone who took his Instagram to 80,000. He will remove a course of 99 rupees, Instagram Masterclass 101. Take this course and you will be the king of Instagram and stuff like that. So when things like these are happening, as a company, do you actually value online certifications, online courses, or what is the scene going on with this entire online thing?
See, online certification cannot be a criteria for recruitment or something. But online, if there is a guy who has a lot of online certifications, it does add up to his profile strength. I'll tell you why. Because doing online certification is also not that easy, right? Because you have to complete entire courses. So if, let us say, if there is a guy who has 10-20 who has done 10-20 courses, so we can at least consider him that he cares for learning, right? Because not everyone would go to Udemy and do these courses. So that is one criteria. Another thing is, they are not benchmarks like MBA or everything, because they have very tough clearance exams. So, but if someone is doing an online course, we can at least, as an organization, we can at least judge what are the topics of his liking. Let us say if someone has done 10 courses, one on Facebook, another on Google, another on this ads, that ads. So we'll be able to understand, okay, this is how this guy thinks, this is what he likes learning, and this is where he can fit in our organization. So online courses do matter a lot. But when it comes to the benchmark, when it comes to the clearance, that only on the basis of online courses, you will not get any job. They are just a way to understand you and your learning attitude, but they will not qualify you for any job.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next, what I wanted to ask you was that, you yourself run a startup. So firstly, I would like to touch this entire topic of bootstrapped versus venture-backed models. Like the startups who run themselves bootstrapped, like I guess this one, the Nitin Kamath, who actually runs Zerodha. He is very much like, he's very vocal about him being a bootstrap company. and he says it with much pride that we have not raised any money and we have grown by our own selves. Versus there are companies who are venture backed, like Swiggy for example, and or Flipkart for example, and they'll just burn cash and get returns. So firstly, like as a startup founder, what is your general opinion on these two models? Like which one do you prefer and reasons for the same?
See, the answer, I think the answer will vary from person to person because every individual is backed with different resources. So, if we talk about my case, I am also a bootstrap startup. So, I think that is what I am doing right now. But of course, see, if I am backed with a very innovative idea wherein a venture capitalist would want to invest, then it will act as a catalyst. Right. So if I'm working with a vision, I'm working with a specific vision, and if there is a catalyst to it, why would I not want to take the support? So I think it depends from resources. It depends for every individual, every founder, or every leadership team, what resources they have and what vision are they having. These two things can determine whether getting bootstrapped is the right idea, or getting investment from venture capitalists is the right idea. In my case, I feel the idea is not I do not come up with a very out of the box idea on board, right? This is just a digital marketing company. We just have a different approach of doing it. So that is where I feel the bootstrapped model is a better idea, and that is what I feel.
Yeah, that makes sense. In having said that, in the VC circuit, there are certain events which we read off. Like I was recently listening to a podcast in which they actually mentioned that some of the world's biggest venture capitalists, they are very brutal when it comes to them taking back their profits. Like they are very shrewd when it comes that, okay, if I've given you $1, I need to make 100 back, and they will do anything that they want to get that done. So there are incidents like there are certain top VCs who have the mantra, like this is their core skill that they do, that within 4 to 5 years of putting their money in, say, a startup, they will play tactics. They will make the founders fight amongst themselves. They will chuck off the founders and they'll hire a professional CEO. They will do things like that. In hiring a CEO also, there are things like hire a star CEO. Star CEO as in an individual who has a huge personal brand, so that he becoming the CEO of that company will increase the stocks of that company, because people will think that, okay, this guy has come up on board. And so there are all these games that are being played inside the VC world. So do you think that having known all of these, a startup should like look forward to VCs? Because all the startups that we see right now, they generally start off with an idea that, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to change something or the other. And when things like this happen, wherein like every quarter on quarter you need to report your profits, you need to become so shrewd with your books, then do you think like there's some amount of toxicity when it comes to taking VCs?
See, again, it depends from relationship to relationship between startups and venture capitalists. But see, what I feel is the only thing that a startup entrepreneur should care of is a win-win situation between all his stakeholders. Now, let us say he is collaborating with a venture capitalist. He feels कि यार मेरे में कोई इतने करोड़ रुपए का इन्वेस्टमेंट करे so that हमारा कंपनी इतना आगे बढ़े. So that is his benefit, right? So venture capitalists, they are not social workers. They are not running NGOs. So they are also investing for a purpose, right? So basically, both parties have specific intentions, and if a CEO takes a decision wherein the win-win situation is there, wherein he knows कि okay, मेरे में अगर venture capitalist इतना invest करेगा तो उसको इतना मिलेगा, there is clear expectation setting, there is clear understanding between everything. If the situation is win-win, why would any party want to separate, right? But a phase comes when there is no win-win situation. If that phase comes wherein a founder failed his words, whatever he said, or a venture capitalist feels कि नहीं यार अभी ये बंद कर दे तो ये अच्छा है, बाकी they are making loss. So when the win-win situation goes out of the box, then such things happen. And it is responsibility of founder, of the leader, to ensure there is win-win relationship. If it is not, things like this will definitely happen. So if you have the power to make a win-win situation, then and only then you should get into venture capitalists.
Yeah, that makes sense. So next, what I wanted to ask was that what are your plans as a company? What do you plan to do in the coming, say, 5 to 10 years? Because right now, what you're doing, like for the research of this podcast, I was binging through a YouTube channel wherein there was this 30-minute video of an RJ coming to your office and interviewing you. And that was a very beautifully made video because it actually showed that you have your systems and processes in place. There are departments, there are people who are looking after those departments, and like the funnel, the pipeline is created and it's working as per requirement. So now where do you plan to expand? Like where do you plan that, okay, my company would be entering into these domains, say 3 years from now or 5 years from now?
See, 3 years from now, our aim is, see, we do not want to grow in terms of number of clients, but we want to grow in terms of quality of clients. So let us say if we are having a client whose net worth is, let us say, 10 crores these days, we want to work with clients whose net worth is 100 crores or 1000 crores. So basically our goal is we want to start working with well-known brands. Let us say if we are working with a local saloon, we aim to work with Lakme. So now that is our goal, right? So we want to grow in terms of quality of clients, in terms of evaluation of clients, and in order to do that, we have set up 2 phases. We are making our brand value in such a way that these big brands would want to trust us. And another thing is we are making our processes and recruitments and team building in such a way that we can cater to these brands. So in next 3 years, we aim to have at least 5 to 7 national brands as our clients, and whose work we are doing from Vadodara itself.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like this is just coming out of a question that in Baroda, I've seen this happening that there is a very high boom of food bloggers. A lot of people have taken up food bloggers. Generally, these are school, college students who start clicking pictures of food items, and sometimes their page starts growing, and then they reach a certain following, and then they take up influencer deals and all. So I feel that this is a huge gap in Baroda, that the entire food blogging industry is very much separated. Like I've spoken to certain food bloggers who have their page at 25-30K followers, and they charge something which is like 700 or 1000 for a story or post, which is highly underpriced in my opinion. So I feel that the reason why this is underpriced is that say this fellow who is a food blogger at 30K, this guy is demanding 3000 rupees, but then there is equivalently another food blogger at 27K who might do it for 500 rupees. So any rational businessman would think that, okay, if the viewership is almost the same, so it breaks the market in a certain way because the market is not centralized and it's not centrally controlled. So do you plan to enter into the influencer marketing space wherein you start managing all the food bloggers of Baroda, for an example, to start with, and then you negotiate the deals, you get in the brands, and just because you are centralizing this entire system, you potentially hold power to all big food bloggers, like you hold a control over them. So now if you say that this is the rate, they won't get a lower rate in market anywhere. And
exactly. So amazing question. We have already launched one initiative named the Prinkit.in Influencer Network. So you can visit our website and see that. Under this initiative, what we are doing is we have made certain verticals. One is pages and influencers based on news and stories. Another is food bloggers, and food category, fitness category, fashion and styling. So we have made certain categories wherein we are, already, centralizing all these influencers. We also decided our packages and criteria, how we create a win-win situation between us and client and between us and food blogger. So yeah, we do see a scope wherein, we raise the pricing standards of all the food bloggers. But another challenge that we are facing is, see, food blogger is not someone who eats new things daily and uploads their photograph. That is a big misunderstanding, and that is what many food bloggers these days are doing. Food blogger is someone who has the sense, who has the knowledge of the actual taste, who knows what food is balanced and what is not, who knows what actual Italian is, who knows what actual Chinese is, right? So when a food blogger goes to a restaurant, he gives a neutral review कि ये खाना में क्या अच्छा है, ये खाने में क्या नहीं अच्छा है, ये खाने में कितना बैलेंस्ड है, कितना ये है वो है. अगर आपने कोई मास्टर शेफ देखा हो सीजन, उसमें कैसे वो संजीव कपूर समझाते हैं कि यार, सो दैट इज व्हाट अ फूड ब्लॉगर इज. सो अभी क्या हो रहा है कि अच्छे अच्छे मोबाइल की अच्छे अच्छे फोटो खींच के दे अपलोड एंड दे से कि यम्मी फूड, ये फूड. सो दैट इज नॉट फूड ब्लॉगिंग. So actual food bloggers, first of all, people need to understand what actual food blogging is. They need to get into the science of taste, right? They need to get into the science of the entire this food. एक खाना में क्या क्या चीजें होती है, the fragrance of it, the colors of it, so and then someone qualifies to become a food blogger. So ये ऐसे food bloggers वडोदरा में काफी कम है. That is again the similar thing that I shared, like digital marketing inflation जैसा हो रहा है. Same is with food blogging also. So if you find real food bloggers, तो उनके followers you will see naturally बहुत ज्यादा हो गए, and they deserve the amount worth their effort, and that is where Prinkit.in will definitely come into picture with this influencer network. We will ensure they get what they deserve.
And about the same food influencer things, this is just my general observation. Now you hold an agency under you. I guess you can give some more insight into this. This is my layman's observation about this, that in Baroda especially, food bloggers are missing out on a big opportunity, which is they are not adding personality to their pages. Like today, if you just hold by say 7 food blogging pages, top 7 food blogging pages of Baroda, just scroll their feed one after the another. You won't be able to identify that this is the feed of this page, this is the feed of that page. There's no difference, because ultimately you can't difference between the pages of all these people. And that's when I feel that food bloggers should enter into the video segment a bit, wherein they start posting IGTVs more frequently, so that people can actually differentiate. What is the difference? How do I differentiate as a viewer between A, B, and C, wherein all 3 are posting the same images and stuff? Now you can debate on that, that no, we click pictures better, things like that. Ultimately, for the end viewer, it's the same feed that's being scrolled. So do you agree with this, and like what's the take on that?
Yes, I completely agree with you on this. That when human, personality is involved, when the video gets personified, it definitely, gets more traction. At the same time, personal brand also becomes stronger. So monetizing also becomes better. So I completely agree with you on this.
Yeah. So almost we are towards the end of this podcast. A couple of questions pending, which is that you guys are inherently into the marketing space. You help clients market, right? So right now, a lot of brands, especially the well-established brands, are under this dilemma that what approach should they take up with their marketing campaigns. So there are brands who are known for their very witty replies, that they reply to people's tweets and all in a very intellectual manner, and like it's sometimes funny. Like Zomato does this thing, Swiggy does this thing, and the risk with that is that sometimes it can bring your brand down. That some part of community just gets offended by it, and then you're screwed on Twitter. There are instances like that happen as well. And then there is a flip side of the story, wherein in the world which we are living in, you have to pay a lot to get eyeballs, and just one witty tweet reply can get you massive eyeballs. Like recently an incident happened wherein Swiggy gave a very classic reply to one of the people who had written to their help center, and they said that hey, sorry, we refund only food packages, we don't refund failed education. That replied in a very witty manner, and that thing got picked up. Almost every blogging website, every newspaper had that headline, that Swiggy stops trolls and all. So there are flip sides to this. What do you think? What should be a company's approach? Should they go the traditional way, the nice marketing, or should they do all these activities?
See, I think doing it has no such big problem if done in the right way. Yeah, at times things go out of control, but see, firstly, it depends from the organizational brand and their brand guidelines. See, every brand has their own guidelines, right? For example, Microsoft has their own way of presenting their brand. Google has their own way of presenting it. Microsoft, if you want to fill a form, उसमें ऐसा लिखा होगा, please fill the form below. Google में, if you want to fill a form, उसमें ऐसा लिखा, hey, please tell us your name. So Google keeps it personalized, Microsoft keeps it professional. Same way, every brand has their own guidelines. So depending upon ensuring that no guideline is tempered, you should take such initiatives. You should definitely do activities wherein we call it viral marketing, doing things which go viral. So we should definitely do it, but being in the parameter of brand guidelines. Getting out of it is a challenge, but inside it we should definitely do it. And of course, at times we also have to face the consequences for it. But all in all, if we see the net effect, it goes positive only.
Yeah, and then we have case studies wherein brands have openly said, like for example, Uber had openly voiced their like they were against black racism when that entire wave was happening, and that openly stated that we are not going to tolerate stuff like that. And a certain segment started hating them and started commenting negative on their Instagram feeds and all. And they took the screenshots of those hate comments, posted it on their stories, and said that, okay, here's your opinion, but we are not going to change ours. Like it's not that okay, Tanish के खिलाफ बोला तो ad नीचे करवा दी. It's not like that. They openly said that, okay, do whatever you want. This is our opinion, and as a company, we stand by that. Hate as much as you want. So there are companies who even take those hard calls like that.
Definitely.
So like, and ending the podcast on with a question which I ask like almost every guest, that this is like my staple end question for the podcast, which is like, now you have been through this entire conversation. If you had to summarize this entire conversation in a minute and tell the viewer, like what incentive do they get sitting through an entire hour of podcast? Like what are they going to learn out of this, and how would you summarize this entire conversation in a minute? What is the takeaways out of this?
Okay, so if I sum up everything, one is that digital marketing is the new thing. A lot of opportunities are going to get generated if you join the right perfect digital marketing company. If you go to any company, any organization, one of the major selection criteria, as including Prinkit.in, is your attitude. So you need to work and you need to self-reflect on your attitude, what you are doing, how you are doing, and everything. That is a major criteria. If you are an entrepreneur, then one thing you need to consider is you need to have proper awareness and knowledge of what exactly digital marketing is, so that you can make the right decision of hiring a perfect marketing agency and not getting into anyone's hands and relying on them with a hope. Another important thing that we learned is that see, every brand have their own personas, every brand has their own way of presenting themselves in the market, and you should definitely be willing to do such viral marketing stunts, but being in your brand parameter. So all in all, and along with that, any entrepreneur should not focus on building an environment like family or a team wherein everyone has this bro code, but they should work on building their systems so well, or a task flow so well, leadership so well, that family like living, family like environment becomes a byproduct, becomes a function of it.
Yeah,
that is all I think we learned.
Yeah, so that was the entire podcast, and I personally enjoyed it a lot because I am much into this entire space of digital, of marketing, and I've worked with certain brands. So speaking with so what happens is that speaking with some renowned brands, they cannot leave down their guards a lot. Like even when they speak very cautiously. So speaking with you, that was a big advantage, that you could actually be honest and you could actually say things the way they were. So that is like my takeaway from this podcast, and I enjoyed it a lot.
I mean, and the questions that you asked were also very amazing. Like it looks like you have deep knowledge of what you are doing, and that was very amazing. Generally, people ask you, "Kaise kiya, kya kiya, kyun kiya?" You actually went in depth and asked questions that really matter to people. So salute to you on that.
Yeah, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for giving your time over here.
Amazing. All right.